I'm joined in the studio by Nabila Ramdani, North Africa analyst and journalist. Welcome. Thanks very much for joining us. Your first impressions of the speech that you've just heard?
Well, I have to say I found President Obama's speech very unimpressive because he will, in my opinion, he will be perceived with an awful lot of skepticism in the Arab and Muslim world. It was a formidable chance for President Obama to reassess and reorient his foreign policy as far as the Arab and Muslim world is concerned. But instead, he served us with platitudes as far as America's commitment to democracy is concerned. Well, we have seen how the actions of the Obama administration showed otherwise as far as the response to the Arab Spring was concerned.
Why such scepticism, though? Because didn't he say what they would have wanted to hear? He said that he was on their side, people who were fighting for freedom of speech. He said that the US would stand behind them.
Well, he was encouraging, he was very supportive of the pro-democracy movements which swept throughout the Middle East and indeed North Africa. But also we've seen how the Obama administration sent mixed messages. It didn't support Egypt until the last minute, for example, the pro-democracy movements in Egypt. It ignored Tunisia, in effect, because it's not of strategic interest to America. We've seen how Syria, for example, the economic sanctions that America is now threatening to apply on Syria won't be enough to pressure President Assad. And in Libya, effectively, President Obama was dragged in a war by the two hawks, which are Britain and France.
OK, well, stay with us, because we're just going to get a little bit more reaction now from Heather Hurlbert, who joins us from Washington, D.C., the Executive Director of the National Security Network based in Washington, D.C. Thanks very much for joining us. We're just hearing from our guests in the studio that President Obama's speech, unimpressive. What were your thoughts?
Well, I think you have to bear in mind that he's trying to reach two very different audiences, and one is to communicate to Arabs themselves that we understand that the momentum for change and their own destinies are in their hands. But at the same time, he's trying to put this in context for Americans and help them understand what they're seeing and what it means for them. And that's really a rather momentous task, to try to do both of those things at once.
Any sympathy with that view? He's speaking to two very, very different audiences.
Well, I think what this speech has illustrated is that, as ever, America is driven by its self-interest rather than its genuine support for pro-democracy movements. And if anything, it showed how supportive it still was of, by funding, assisting logistically dictators. So I think that was far from impressive. Perhaps the positive aspect in Obama's speech was the economic package which he offered to Tunisia and Egypt. That is, in my opinion, tokenistic, but symbolically it means a lot, in the sense that America is showing some understanding of the basis of the revolutions or the uprising that swept across the region, which have a lot to do with socio-economic grievances and also the lack of basic freedoms. And he pledged that the aid would go towards the development of civil societies. So in that respect, there's a shift in American foreign policy, in the sense that it's not looking at the Arab-Muslim world in terms of security threats only, but it seems to be committed to the development of civil society as well.
Heather Hurlbert, how much of a shift in policy do you think it marked? Is this the beginning of a new chapter?
Something that I think is worth pointing out on the aid package, in fact, is that the debt relief that he announced today has been the #1 priority that you've heard from not just the Egyptian government, but the democracy activists and the people in Tahrir Square, who said the most important thing for us is to move forward with dignity, free from the Mubarak era debt. So that, to me, marks a very important shift, that we're saying the response here is what is it that you, people of the region, need to build your societies, and not necessarily what it is that some other country thinks is good for you. And that's a really significant shift toward an entirely different quality of relationship and partnership going forward.
Nabila Ramdani, a new approach in that sense?
Very much so, and I think another important point which was made by President Obama is his commitment to establish a Palestinian state, and in that respect I think his views will converge with Prime Minister David Cameron, but also President Sarkozy, whom he will be meeting next week. So the commitment to a two-state solution, I think, is crucial for the stability of the region and indeed the establishment of peace in the region.
Heather Hurlbert, how much of a kick-start to that peace process do you think the speech marked today?
Well, again, this speech is actually the beginning of what's going to be a very active week on the peace process, in that we have Prime Minister Netanyahu coming into town over the weekend, President Obama giving another speech on Sunday, where I think we'll hear some further development of both the commitment to his two-state solution, the commitment to the 67 borders, and the insistence that both sides do really concrete things and get beyond some of the really distressing things we've seen in the last year, and then the Europe trip that your colleague mentioned.
And how do you think what we've heard today will play in the United States? What will people there be thinking about it?
Well, you know, two things. First, making the point that there are significant opportunities for the U.S. here, that Americans should look toward what's happening in the Middle East with hope, putting it in the context of the civil rights movement here, the Civil War, change that Americans understand based on universal principles that we share with people in Arab countries and all over the world. So that's one really critically important domestic component for the U.S. to be able to respond constructively going forward. And then second, I think, signaling very clearly that the U.S. remains committed to the peace process and to the kind of economic assistance we were talking about. So that's three very clear signals to the home audience.
OK, Heather Hurlbert in Washington, D.C., thank you very much indeed to you, and our thanks also to Nabila Ramdani, who joined us in the studio. Thank you.